Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prishtaya Bhutane Srimad Bhakti-vedanta Swami Niti Namine Namaste Sarasvate Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Shunyavare Vishmatya Desha Tarine Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadara Shivasadi Gauravakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram Rama Rama Hare Hare Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. We're reading from Srimad Bhagavatam, 10th canto, chapter 87, text 21. The prayers of the Vedas personified, translation purport by the disciples of His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhakti-vedanta Swami Prabhupada. Duravagatma tattva nigamaya tavata tanosh. Duravagatma tattva nigamaya tavata tanosh. Charita mahamritabdi parivarta parishramana. Charita mahamritabdi parivarta parishramana. Naparila shanti kechit apavargam apishvarate. Naparila shanti kechit apavargam apishvarate. Charana saroja hangsa kula sangha visrishta griha. Charana saroja hangsa kula sangha visrishta griha. Duravagatma tattva nigamaya tavata tanosh. Duravagatma tattva nigamaya tavata tanosh. Charita mahamritabdi parivarta parishramana. Charita mahamritabdi parivarta parishramana. Naparila shanti kechit apavargam apishvarate. Naparila shanti kechit apavargam apishvarate. Charana saroja hangsa kula sangha visrishta griha. Charana saroja hangsa kula sangha visrishta griha. Next life. Anyway, so these are the Vedas praying. You can try to pray. Duravagama, difficult to understand. Atma, of the self. Tattva, the truth. Nigamaya, in order to propagate. Tava, of you. Ata, who have assumed. Tanoho, your personal forms. Charita, of the pastimes. Maha, vast. Amrita, of nectar. Abdi, in the ocean. Parivarta, by diving. Parishramana, who have been relieved of fatigue. Naparilashanti, do not wish for. Kechit, a few persons. Apavargam, liberation. Api, even. Ishvara, O Lord. Te, your. Charana, at the feet. Saroja, lotus. Hangsa, of swans. Kula with the community. Sangha because of association. Visrishta abandoned. Griha whose homes. Translation. My Lord, some fortunate souls have gotten relief from the fatigue of material life by diving into the vast nectar ocean of your pastimes, which you enact when you manifest your personal forms to propagate the unfathomable science of the self. These rare souls, indifferent even to liberation, renounce the happiness of home and family because of their association with devotees who are like flocks of swans enjoying at the lotus of your feet.
Мой Господи, някои щастливи души са се освободили от умората на материалния живот, като са се потопили в дълбокият, необятният нектарен океан на Твоите забавления, които Ти извършваш, когато проявяваш личностните си форми, за да разпространяваш трудоразбавяемата наука за себе. Тези редки души, безразлични дори към освобождението, се отричат от щастието на дома и семейството, преди тяхното общуване с преданите, които са като лебеди, наслаждаващи се на лотосите на Твоите лозе.
Purport. Ritualistic brahmanas, smartas, and impersonalists, mayavadis, always try to relegate the process of Bhakti-yoga to a relative or minor role.
Ритуалистичните брамани, смартите и имперсоналистите, майявадите винаги се опитват да принизят процеса на бхакти до незначителна роля.
They say that devotion to the personality of Godhead is for sentimental persons who lack the maturity to observe strict rituals or pursue the rigorous culture of knowledge.
Те казват, че преданността към върховната личност е за сантименталисти, които е близо със зрелостта да следват стриктните ритуали или пък да следват трудната култура на познанието.
This was the accusation the Mayavadi sannyasis in Varanasi directed toward Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu.
Това са били упреците на Майавади саньясите към Чайтания Махапрабху в Варанаси.
They criticized him as for being a sentimentalist
Те са го критикували, че е бил сентименталист,
who didn't take the time to study Vedanta. And not only he was not doing that, but he was singing and dancing in the company of low-class people. So the sannyasis, the Vedantists, being proud of their so-called knowledge, they thought this is a minor role. Something for people, yes, who lack maturity. So as described in the Adi Lila, 7th chapter, the devotees hearing this criticism every day practically, they became very afflicted or, how you say, yes, sad and disturbed. So they asked the Lord, they actually made arrangements so he would meet with the Mayavadis. And somehow or other, these Mayavadis were not offenders. They were more or less innocent. So as soon as they saw Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, actually they already became very much impressed by his presence.
И щом видели Чайтанья Махапрабху, те били впечатлени само от неговото присъствие.
And immediately Prakashananda Saraswati, who was the leader, he went and took him by his hand to take him in their middle. He was sitting where the shoes were kept, very humbly.
И понеже Чайтанья Махапрабху седнал там, където се измиват нозете, веднага лидерът на Майявадите Пракашананда отишъл и го хвана за ръка.
And then they actually asked him, why are you not studying Vedanta? Why are you singing and dancing like, this is not, it's like, looks like immature, sentimental.
Го попитали веднага, защо ти не изучаваш Веданта, защо пееш и танцуваш, което е нещо нишето, изглежда не е зряло, сентиментално.
And then Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says this well-known reply that my spiritual master looked at me like a murka, a fool. Not qualified to study Vedanta. So Prabhupada always says we should, in front of the spiritual master, although we may be more learned even, we should take that position of being a murka.
Ученика винаги трябва да изглежда да се счита за глупак пред духовния учител, да е поучен.
And not be proud, like for example Srila Bhaktisiddhanta Saraswati. Externally one would think maybe that he was vastly more learned than Gokishore Das Babaji, who didn't even know how to sign his name.
И да не се счита за по-учен, да не се гордее, както ако видим за пример Шрила Бхактисиданта Сарасвати винаги бил смирен, макар че от външна гледна точка изглежда много по-учен от своя духовен учител, който не може да се подписва.
So anyway, then they were asking questions in actually a very humble attitude, and he was replying and explaining to them actually Vedanta.
Те започнали да му задават смирени въпроси, той им отговорил като обясни Веданта.
And they said, yes, actually we were never really satisfied with these explanations, and thank you very much for explaining it now to us. And they became devotees. So, in this verse, however, the personified Vedas most emphatically declare the super excellence of devotional service, clearly identifying it with Atma Tattva, the science of the self that impersonalists so proudly claim as their own domain.
Ясно отъждествявайки го с Атма Татва или науката за себе, която им персоналистите толкова горделиво се опитват да си присвоят.
Srila Jiva Goswami here defines Atma Tattva as the confidential mystery of the Supreme Lord's personal forms, qualities and pastimes.
Шрила Джива Госвами тук определя Атма Татва като повелителната мистерия за личностите, форми, качества и забавления на Върховния Бог.
Let's see, he gives a secondary meaning to Atana Tano, which means who has assumed personal forms.
Той също дава второстепенно значение за фразата Ата Тано, което означава приемащ личностни форми.
Yes. Instead of meaning who assumes various bodies, the phrase can also mean he who attracts everyone to his transcendental body.
Освен значението, което приема различни тела, фразата също може да означава и този, който привлича всички към своето трансцендентално тяло.
The pastimes of Lord Krishna and his various expansions and incarnations are an unfathomable ocean of enjoyment.
Забавленията на Бог Кришна и неговите различни разширения и инкарнации са необятен океан от наслаждение.
As Chaitanya Mahaprabhu says, Anandam Buddhi Vardhanam. An ocean generally does not move, and we are lucky it doesn't. But the ocean of bhakti is always increasing.
океана от бхакти постоянно нараства.
When a person comes to the point of complete exhaustion in his materialistic pursuits, whether he has been searching after material success or some impersonal notion of spiritual annihilation, he can get relief by submerging himself in this nectar.
Когато човек постигне в окончателното си изтощаване в материалистичните цели, независимо дали търси материален успех или някаква безличностна идея за духовно унищожение, той може да достигне освобождение, като се потопи в този нектар.
As Srila Rupa Goswami explains in his textbook on the science of Bhakti-yoga, Sri Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, rendered into English by Srila Prabhupada as the nectar of devotion, one who tastes even a single drop of this vast ocean will forever lose all desire for anything else.
Както Шрила Рупа Госвами обяснява в своят учебник върху науката за Бхакти-йога, Шри Бхакти Расамрита Синду, предаден на английски Шрила Прабхупад като нектарът на предаността, този, който вкуси дори една капчица от необятния океан, този необятен океан, завинаги ще забрави всичките си желания за каквото и да е друго.
Good. Okay, in this connection, let us look at a very wonderful verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adilita 2.2. You may want to look for that. And this is another meter. I'm not sure what the name is, but this melody I know. It's the famous melody of the Shat Goswami-ashtaka. And it starts in the same way as the first verse, and I can try to render it. Krishnot kirtana gana nartana kala pato jani brajita sadbhaktavali hangsa chakra madhupa srini viharaspadam karna nandi kaladvanir vahatume Jiva Maru Prangane Sri Chaitanya Dayani Deta Valasal Lila Sudasvarduni. The meaning is, O my merciful Lord Chaitanya, may the nectarian Ganges waters of your transcendental activities flow on the surface of my desert-like tongue.
The meter is Shardula Vikridite. It's the slow-walking tiger.
The slow-walking tiger.
Very famous.
All right. Why not?
О, мой милостиви Бог Чайтания, нека нектарните води на Ганга, на твоите трансцендентални забавления, текат на повърхността на моят език, като моят пустинен език.
Beautifying these waters are the lotus flowers of singing, dancing and loud chanting of Krishna's holy name, which are the pleasure abodes of unalloyed devotees.
Украсяващи водите на тази река са лотосовите цветя на пеенето, танцуването и силното възпяване на святото име на Кришна, които са обителта на удоволствие за чистите предани.
These devotees are compared to swans, ducks, and bees, and the river's flowing produces a melodious sound that gladdens their ears.
Тези предани са сравнени с лебеди, птици и пчели, носещи се по водата. Всичко носещо се по водите на тази река е един мелодичен звук, който радва техните уши.
Is this poetic?
Yes.
Good.
Difficult
Should be.
to translate.
Yes,
Like
very good, very good, very good. Now, purport by Srila Prabhupada. Our tongues always engage in vibrating, useless sounds that do not help us realize transcendental peace.
Пояснение от Шрила Прабхупада. Нашите езици винаги са заети да създават безполезни звуци, които не ни помагат да осъзнаем трансценденталното удовлетворение.
The tongue is compared to a desert because a desert needs a constant supply of refreshing water to make it fertile and fruitful.
Езикът е сравнен с пустиня, тъй като пустинята има нужда от постоянна свежа вода, за да може тя да бъде плодородна.
Water is the substance most needed in the desert.
Субстанцията най-необходима в пустинята е водата.
The transient pleasure derived from mundane topics of art, culture, politics, sociology, dry philosophy, poetry, and so on is compared to a mere drop of water because although such topics have a qualitative feature of transcendental pleasure, they are saturated with the modes of material nature.
Преходното удоволствие, извличано от светските теми на изкуството, културата, политиката, социологията, сухата философия, поезията и така нататък са сравнени с една капчица от вода, тъй като макар такива теми да се квалифицирана черта на трансценденталното удоволствие, те са изпълнени или са докоснати от трите гуни на материалната природа.
This is a very interesting sentence.
Yes.
Because there is some pleasure there, one cannot deny.
Защото в тях има удоволствие, не може да отречем.
And actually in Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada says that this pleasure is the enemy. No, Prabhupada says, he mentions that because there is some, we say, well, it's all suffering, right? And there's no real pleasure, that's also true. But there is a transient pleasure, and because we are eager to experience pleasure, so therefore we become attached.
Има някакво преходно удоволствие, понеже търсим такова удоволствие и се привързваме.
So yes, all right, it's water, like the water, but it's only a drop. The desert needs not just a drop. A drop in the desert is like useless practically.
Да, има някакво удоволствие, но като капчица и в пустинята тя няма да ни свърши работа.
So therefore, because although such topics have a qualitative feature of transcendental pleasure, that's the interesting part. Like everything else, it's like a reflection. It's not false. That's the whole point. It's coming from the Supreme, so there's a little bit of something that is very attractive, like the sunshine when it comes up, the sunrise, the sunset, and the nature, and flowers, and birds singing, and it's coming from Krishna, so therefore it's very attractive.
Това е интересното тук, че се казва такова удоволствие, всъщност е споделено от трансценденталното удоволствие, тъй като всичко произлиза от Кришна. То не е неистинско, но тук го възприемаме като отражение и затова ни прилича като изгреба на слънцето, природата. Има нещо приятно, но то е отражение на истинско.
But they're saturated with something else, the modes of nature. So you have this strange combination of the modes of passion, ignorance, even sattva, and this transcendental spark drop that is in the background.
Имаме тази комбинация, всъщност удоволствие, което е проникнато от гуните на природата, става с раджас, дори сатва и на фона на това има тази капчица трансценденталност.
Now therefore Prabhupada says, therefore neither collectively nor individually can they satisfy the vast requirements of the desert-like tongue.
Затова казва Прабхупад, нито колективно, нито индивидуално те могат да удовлетворят огромните нужди на пустинния език, който е като пустиня.
Therefore one can say, and one say, well, what's the proof? That no matter what you do, no matter how much you try to enjoy and you have all the facilities for it, still you will not be satisfied.
Какво е доказателството? Някой може да пита, каквото и да правим, каквото и да се опитваме да се наслаждаваме, никога няма да постигнем крайно удовлетворение.
I mean, there are these people, there are not many. Sometimes I call them, at least in German, the upper 10,000.
Има една класа от хора в Германия ги наричат висшия ешелон 10,000.
So it may be 10,000, it may be 100,000, maybe depending on the age and on the circumstances, you have more or less of them. But there's a very small percentage of people who really, you could have everything.
И те могат са 10 или 100 хиляди, но са много малък процент. Това са хората, които кавички могат да си позволят да имат всичко.
And amongst those, there are also different categories, because there's 4 main opulences that people aspire for.
И сред тях има различни категории, защото има основно 4 съвършенства, за които хората, към които се стремят.
The Janma, Aishwarya, Shruta, Ishri. This is a good birth in a high-class family, a lot of money, and learning, and beauty.
Това са раждане в аристократично семейство, много пари, богатства, красотата и знание.
So rarely you find all 4 in one person.
Много рядко може да открием и 4 в един човек.
At least learning will be missing. Right? Generally. You may be a really high-class family, well, high-class, let's say Srimati, a very rich dynasty, family type. And you have all the money one can desire, and you may be very attractive. But you're stupid. And sometimes you have these people who are really absolutely geniuses in their field, and then they may be deformed or have a, this poor Stephen Hawking, people like that. So they're not very attractive physically, but because have such a big brain, they're also attractive.
Или пък имате тези, които външно имат някакъв недък, но пък имат толкова брилянтен мозък, че това е също привлекателно.
Anyway, so even those people, they may have a parent, and everybody is envious. If I could be like them, or in that position, my life would be perfect.
И всички се виждат на тези хора, като си мислят, ако аз имах това, което те имат, живота ми ще да е съвършен.
Some of them, they really don't have to work at all. Never. They may just do something because otherwise they're bored.
Няма нужда да работят. Може би нещо ще направят, защото се оттегчават иначе.
And if they go shopping, they don't have to think how much does it cost. They don't even ask how much it costs. I like this, take my card.
Когато отидат на пазар, няма нужда да питат колко струва това. Просто си дават картата и казват давай.
Yeah, it's like unlimited. So anyway, but even that, neither collectively nor individually, the real need of the soul can never be satisfied, even if you go to the highest planet in the universe.
Но, както тук се казва, нито индивидуално, нито колективно, истинската нужда на душата не може да бъде удовлетворена, дори да отиде на най-висшата позиция в Вселената.
Prabhupada continues because it talks about the tongue. Despite crying in various conferences, therefore the desert-like tongue continues to be parched.
Въпреки плаченето в различни конференции за това, езика като пустиня продължава да бъде изгорен.
For this reason, people from all parts of the world must call for the devotees of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who are compared to swans swimming around the beautiful lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, or bees humming around his lotus feet in transcendental pleasure, searching for honey.
По тази причина, хората по целия свят трябва да търсят преданите Шри Чайтания Махапрабху, които са сравнявани с лебеди, плуващи около красивите лотосови лозе на Шри Чайтания Махапрабху, или пчели, които жужжат около неговите лотосови лозе в трансцендентално удоволствие, търсейки мед.
Yes, but nobody calls.
Но никой не търси преданите.
Yeah, that's the fact.
Това е.
And not only that, as Prabhupada experienced in New York, and he always, many times mentioned in his lectures, that when the devotees chant, they call the police because it's a nuisance.
Не само, че не търсят преданите, но дори когато чуят киртан, хората понякога викат полиция, защото мислят, че това е притеснително.
The dryness of material happiness cannot be moistened by so-called philosophers who cry for Brahman, liberation, and similar dry speculative objects.
Сухотата на материалното щастие не може да бъде наводнена от така наречените философи, които плачат за Браман, освобождение или подобни сухи спекулативни обекти.
The urge of the soul proper is different.
Купнежът на самата душа е различен.
The soul can be solaced only by the mercy of Lord Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and his many bona fide devotees who never leave the lotus feet of the Lord to become imitation Mahaprabhus, but all cling to his lotus feet like bees that never leave a honey-soaked lotus flower.
Душата може да бъде успокоена единствено по милостта на Бог Шри Чайтания Махапрабху и неговите авторитетни предани, които никога не напускат лотосовите нозе на Бога, за да станат имитиращи Махапрабху, но всички те се придържат към неговите лотосови нозе, като пчелите, които никога не напускат изпълнения с мед лотосов цвят.
Lord Chaitanya's movement of Krishna consciousness is full of dancing and singing about the pastimes of Lord Krishna.
Движението на Кришна съзнание на Бог Чайтания е пълно с танци и пеене за забавенията на Бог Кришна.
It is compared herein to the pure waters of the Ganges, which are full of lotus flowers.
Тук то е сравнено с чистите води на Ганга, които са пълни с лотоси.
The enjoyers of these lotus flowers are the pure devotees who are like bees and swans.
Чистите предани са тези, които се наслаждават на лотосите, те са сравнени с пчели и лебеди.
They chant like the flowing of the Ganges, the river of the celestial kingdom.
Те пеят като течащата Ганг, реката на небесното царство.
The author desires such sweetly flowing waves to cover his tongue.
Тук авторът купне такива сладки води да покрият неговия език.
He humbly compares himself to materialistic persons who always engage in dry talk from which they derive no satisfaction.
Тук той смирено се сравнява с материалистите, които винаги са заети в сухи разговори, от които те не извличат никакво удовлетворение.
If they were to use their dry tongues to chant the holy name of the Lord, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, as exemplified by Lord Chaitanya, they would taste sweet nectar and enjoy life.
Ако те използваха своите сухи езици да възпяват святите имена на Бога, както е дал пример Бог Чайтания, те ще вкусят сладък нектар и ще се наслаждават на живота.
So, that's what it's all about. Krishna consciousness.
Това е Кришна съзнание.
Yes, people who are dried out, dry philosophers, they cannot appreciate. They think this is a waste of time, it's inferior, or what was the word used? A minor role in the transcendental, amongst transcendental practices.
Сухите философи, имперсоналисти, търсещи само такова знание, няма да изпитат никога удоволствието на този нектар, защото те считат преданото служене за нещо незначително, някаква ниша роля след пътищата за самопознание.
But actually, the devotees not just do this, tasting sweet nectar and enjoying life, but they also actually learn it, as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu showed in front of the Mayavadi sannyasis.
Преданите не само се наслаждават на този нектар, те са също и учени, както Бог Чайтания демонстрира пред тези Mayavadi сannyaси.
And Srila Prabhupada points that out, that we also have to become knowledgeable, like the Lord, that in case of such a situation, we are able to speak sufficient philosophy to be convincing to those who are ready to hear.
Шрила Прабхупада казва, че ние трябва да придобием достатъчно знание, за да бъдем убедителни, ако е необходимо да защитим позицията на трансценденталното служение в такива ситуации.
And of course, as Krishna points out in Bhagavad Gita, in the beginning stages, one needs to have knowledge about tattva, the real understanding of the Lord and His appearance, His pastimes, in order to be able to worship Him properly.
И както Бог Кришна обяснява в Бхагавад Гита, в началните етапи, за да можем да обожаваме правилно Бога, ние имаме нужда от трансцендентално знание относно позицията на душата, на Бога и как да го служим.
Iti matva bhajanti mam. Those who know all this, then they come to the point of engaging in devotional service.
Тези, които познават тази истина, достигат до нивото или тогава те се заемат с правилно служение.
But then also, the truth is, after advancing sufficiently, knowledge practically takes a back seat.
Но истината е, че след като придобият достатъчно знание, то заема второстепенно място.
And at one point practically disappears.
В един момент на практика изчезва.
And there will remain only tasting.
Ще остане само вкуса.
Asvadan. Yes. So but that cannot be before. Otherwise, it becomes sahaja. Then it's actually sentimental, as the Mayavadi sannyasis are accusing.
Но ако няма това знание, тогава ще бъде наистина сентиментално, както е сахаджията. И те наистина отговарят на този упрек от саньясите.
Yeah, unless one's existence is purified by transcendental knowledge, then the tasting will be also mixed with, or as it was said here, saturated with the material modes, and that is not the way.
Докато съществуването на човек не е пречистено чрез трансцендентално знание, тогава вкусването ще бъде изпълнено с гумите. Ще бъде замърсено и това не е начин.
So therefore, prematurely, one should not give up study and even actually, especially preaching, because that involves explaining knowledge and imagining that I'm just tasting and that's what it's all about, which is true.
Затова човек не трябва преждевременно да изоставя изучаването и проповядването, което включва предаване на знание. Не трябва да го изоставя под претекста, че само ще се наслаждава или само ще вкусва, което всъщност е крайната цел.
So therefore we follow the acharyas. We don't imagine our own process. And especially the six Goswamis, as also Prabhupada always says, we are followers of the six Goswamis because they are the prime examples of this type of devotee. They were definitely on the platform of just tasting. That's in the prayers of the six Goswamis, the last verse, Vibalao. They were always absorbed in thinking about the Lord and His pastimes and feeling separation. But at the same time, they were writing a lot of books.
Това се казва в последния стих от молитвите на Шривасачари към шестимата Госвами. Той казва, те са били постоянно потопени в Валао, в емоцията на разделата и са вкусвали нектара от преданото служение, но през същото време те са писали ангелофии.
So, let's see. I think you have the rest of the purport for you, which is good. Now you get an alternative interpretation of Parishramana. All right, so any comments on the desert-like tongue?
We can feel it.
You can feel it?
Yes.
Yes. So, therefore we have to drink nectar. Saguna nectar. Not nirguna nectar.
Yes. The real thing. The real thing. Yeah.
The real thing. This is so clear, no? It's like this. Unless something has taste, it's like, really. Who is attracted? You just like to, go away, Sometimes they go and no. Or even you taste a little bit, no. Even the animals do this. I mean, you observe cows. They don't just take anything that's green, and they discriminate. I mean, maybe if you're starving, then it doesn't matter. Anything goes. That's also true. In German they say, hunger is the best cook. Which is a fact. If you're starving, really starving, you haven't eaten for 3 days, even a piece of dry saguna bread will be nectarian. You have lots of examples here. Not just the bread, practically anything, except for the sweets yesterday. These were really first class. But anything else is like...
Fast. Don't appreciate.
No, you have to become more purified, probably, to come to the Nirguna platform, to really appreciate that. But the fact is, rasa, that's what it's all about. But you can't do it prematurely, so... yes. So, anyway, any comment? Was there a comment?
He commented.
Oh, he commented, yes.
We experienced the dryness.
Yes, actually that's a fact. And in the material world, as it was pointed out, no matter, as I said, no matter what you get, it may be in the beginning, yes, people enjoy and they're laughing and everything, but at the end it's like, there's this aftertaste which becomes bitter, like even Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, beginning is like, and then at the end is like, you're not very satisfied.
Наслаждението в материалния свят винаги в началото дори да изглежда лъгуващо и привлекателно, има винаги вкус, остатъчен вкус, който е горчив, както по-Кришна казва. Първо е нектар, после е отрова.
And you can look at any type of enjoyment, it's actually like that.
Всеки вид наслаждение тук е така.
Eating, drinking, sex, anything you can think of. Even, the so-called, when they go to a party and at the end it's like, it all starts off with, everybody is excited and everything, and at the end everybody's like hanging somewhere and almost half dead. Yeah, and then you take some powder or something to, all right, get it up again, and then it's really worse. So, and spiritual life is a little bit opposite. In the beginning, maybe a little bit bitter, the bitter pill, the treatment of the physician. And then when you're really cured, then it opens up, the clouds open up, and one can, as it says here, then you taste sweet nectar and enjoy life. Joy. So that's, this is a really fantastic verse. And it's an eternal truth. Huh? And it's a prayer to Lord Chaitanya that hopefully this will happen to me. So this is another prayer one can pray. All right. Prabhupada ki jai, Grantara Srimad Bhagavatam Shri Chaitanya Charitamrita ki jai, Sisi Onitai Gaura Bhakta Vrinda ki jai.